la cucina da chicharrón, poverito. La pobre che non tiene un'aia.
After lunch, you think? Before?
Yeah, the lunch outside.
At what time do you?
But yesterday it was yesterday was 18.
I have. Thank you very much. Thank you.
ma che non funziona. Grazie, fammi sapere Yashir, perché io il mio punto di riferimento è Connect e su Connect la vedete fare. Se no devo girare sulla spazio.
sais pas, ben moi je suis censé aller sur le bateau vers 1h.
D'accord. Et moi, je prendrai la trace.
Et éventuellement je prends le gaz, ouais.
D'accord. Je vais porter un bras pour monter.
D'accord.
C'est facile de ça.
Oui, oui, très
Je
bien.
connais pas.
Très bien, d'accord, pas de problème.
Vea.
Oh.
Sono qui adesso appena raggiunto la
on the loops on overall communications have just pulled go for Dragon's approach to waypoint 1, and they will reach that milestone waypoint 1 in about 9 minutes from now. This waypoint will have the spacecraft 220 meters away from the International Space Station, a little more than 656 feet. And once it reaches that docking access, an additional go-no-go pole will be created, in which the teams will then pull for the arrival of the spacecraft to waypoint 2. And given the go there, Dragon Grace will move to within 20 meters and little more than 65 feet from the orbiting laboratory. And earlier we also had communications that if everything goes to plan and Dragon continues to remain on its trajectory, that they would bypass waypoint 1 and go straight from 0 to waypoint 2. But once it arrives to waypoint 1, this will be the point in the spacecraft's journey in which we will be on what we call the docking axis, which will essentially mean that it is directly in front of the docking port that it'll connect itself to. The crew are right now heading to the space-facing port on the International Space Station, node to zenith of the Harmony module. That zenith meaning it is the side of the space station facing space. So its journey brings it from underneath the International Space Station, Dragon Grace, to swinging up and over top of it, and then arriving at that docking access en route to waypoint 2. We'll continue to bring views of the International Space Station and Dragon Grace spacecraft as we receive them, as the two continuing their chase to connect up as they're now making their way towards the western coast of North America in an orbital nighttime configuration. And we've seen views of the Dragon spacecraft in that orbital nighttime with the strobe lights shining bright. Once it gets closer, it'll actually illuminate the International Space Station. And allow for greater views of the docking port itself that it'll connect to. And again, that node 2 is Zenith port of the Harmony module of the space station. And that anticipated docking time that has now recently been updated to 5:30 a.m. Central, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. Teams on the ground have pulled go for Dragon's approach to waypoint 1. And that arrival to that checkpoint will be a little more than 5 minutes from now. The crew inside Dragon Grace Axiom Mission 4. They are in their launch and entry suits and ready to continue their journey towards the International Space Station. And there you see it, the view from the orbiting laboratory, looking at Dragon Grace. As you see that strobe light we were just mentioning, as it gets closer, will illuminate the side of the orbiting laboratory, as well as the port and starboard lights, the red and green. Crew in their launch and entry suits, providing that extra layer of protection and pressure, and that happens, are in them during these dynamic phases of flight. Now inside 5 minutes from waypoint 1. When Dragon docks to the International Space Station, there will be 5 spacecraft connected to the orbital outpost, and we'll bring the crew up to 11 crew members, and the overall total of the International Space Station to 288 visitors since 1998. They will join the Dragon Endurance spacecraft that brought up Crew 10 back in March. They will also join with the Soyuz MS-27, a spacecraft that brought NASA astronaut Johnny Kim to the International Space Station in early April. And then 2 cargo craft, Progress cargo craft from Roscosmos also aboard the station, and then eventually the Dragon Grace spacecraft, as we get now views inside of Dragon Grace and looking over the shoulders of Commander Peggy Whitson and pilot Shubhanshu Shukla of ISRO. And you see them adjusting their monitors as the approach continues on for Dragon. And then a great view in the middle of the screen there of the path Dragon is taking. Last time we saw inside, it was more towards the left-hand side of the screen, in which Dragon now flying up and over top of the International Space Station. And now we get great views from Dragon Grace, and there's the strobe light. You can see it ever so faintly illuminating the International Space Station as it continues.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon is transmitting docking camera video. Please confirm video and data updating in Dragon Docking Monitor. Also, we have a new docking time of 10:30.
Copies. We are seeing data on the Dragon Docking Monitor, and we copy 10:30 for the new docking time.
Houston copies.
Great communications there on the big loop between the teams in Houston and SpaceX, talking to Dragon Grace and the confirmations of the updated docking time. You heard the words 10:30. That's 10:30 Zulu, which Central Time is 5:30, as we had mentioned, 5:30 a.m. Central, 6:30 a.m. Eastern, as we return to that exciting view from Dragon looking up at the International Space Station. You can ever so faintly see the solar arrays coming into view, and that strobe light illuminating the radiators, which are right along that central portion and angling upward. The International Space Station and the Dragon spacecraft now approaching the west coast of North America. right around the Seattle area, that border between the United States and Canada, as we are approaching 1 minute away from waypoint 1, the second checkpoint and second series of waypoints for the spacecraft to reach to. The teams have already pulled go, but we will listen for the call outs for that waypoint 1 arrival.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue approach to waypoint 2. As a reminder, manual impulsive retreat recovery is not permitted.
And Dragon copies all.
And there you heard communications on the big loop about that soft capture ring, and that is the initial contact that will occur between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station, a soft capture, with that soft capture ring then retracting and the 12 hooks that will drive and connect and form a hard mate between the spacecraft and the International Space Station. From there, power communications will then be connected up, and NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers will make her way into the pressurized mating adapter and get ready for hatch opening procedures, which will require bringing the vestibule, the space between the two hatches, between the International Space Station and Dragon Grace, together. And there we see the orbital sunrise making its way over top of the International Space Station as they continue their pursuit of each other, now angling over at North America. And there in the center screen, if you look at the topmost, the Dragon now perfectly aligned over top of the International Space Station, now looking down at that Node 2 Zenith port, and a great view just off the bottom portion there. That is the Dragon Endurance spacecraft that it'll be just alongside of. So Dragon has reached waypoint 0, and on initial comms earlier that the teams on the ground, once reaching waypoint 1, have been allowed to bypass that waypoint and now move on to waypoint 2, which will be in about 9 minutes from now, and targeting docking in about 14.5 minutes from there. Go, no-go polls for docking in about 7 minutes as the teams on the ground continuing to monitor Dragon's progress. And once they arrive to waypoint 2, there will be a pause, make sure everything is lined up just perfectly before that final approach and docking. This is Mission Control Houston as Dragon Grace and the spacecraft carrying Axiom Mission 4 and their 4 astronauts continuing their approach to the International Space Station. They have just made their way past waypoint 1, which had them at 220 meters away from the space-facing port of the International Space Station's Harmony module. And now on the path to reach waypoint 2, teams on the ground have concurred or agreed that they will take a brief pause at waypoint 2, which is 20 meters away, to make sure everything is aligned precisely. And there you see the view from Dragon and that newly illuminated International Space Station as the two craft navigating its way over North America, coming into an orbital sunrise and daytime period.
Houston station on the big loop. Dragon attitude is still as expected, and station is ready for docking.
Houston copies. At waypoint 2, Dragon will briefly pause to align for docking, then automatically resume approach.
Station copies.
Commentator Rob.
You just heard great communications on the big loop from Station and Dragon, as well as the teams in Houston and in Hawthorne for SpaceX and NASA, as the Dragon Grace spacecraft continuing its approach to the International Space Station, carrying Axiom mission for Commander Peggy Whitson, pilot Shubhanshu Shukla of ISRO, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski of ESA,
Dragon
and
SpaceX
Tibor.
Soft capture ring extension complete. Dragon will continue through waypoint 2 without a hold.
Second copies, no hold at waypoint 2, and good rating extension.
Great communications there. They were anticipating a brief hold to make sure everything aligns, but Dragon Grace continuing on what has been so far so good. A great rendezvous with the International Space Station. They will proceed to continue past waypoint 2. And you also heard in the communications with NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, the station ready for docking. And a great view of the SpaceX Dragon Grace spacecraft making its glacial approach to the International Space Station, and the view from the space station looking up as it approaches the space-facing or Node 2 zenith port of the Harmony module. We are about 4 minutes away from the waypoint 2 arrival, which again they are expecting to move right past through without a hold. That is at the 20-meter mark, and proceed right on into docking, soft capture, and then soft capture ring retraction and hooks to drive. And that capture about
Dragon
8 minutes
SpaceX
and 47.
on the big loop, ground is go for approach 2, and approach is now allowed. Reminder, ensure that visors are closed prior to Dragon's departure from the waypoint. Once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Dragon copies, and we have visors down, and we are go for docking as well. And copy on the approach. Inside 2, chop.
SpaceX copies, visors down, SpaceX crew is go for docking.
All great communications there, as the communications from the ground up to the SpaceX Dragon Grace spacecraft, as visors are down on the 4 astronauts inside, as they continue their approach to the International Space Station, now nearly 7 minutes away from that initial contact. Dragon and the International Space Station now making its way over the northernmost territories of North America and Canada, and heading towards the Atlantic Ocean, as we are now 7.5 minutes away from the approximate docking time, as Dragon will move smoothly past waypoint 2, about 20 meters away. And continuing its fine-tuning and approach, you see little plumes coming off the spacecraft. Again, those are those thruster firings, continuing to inch and adjust the spacecraft towards the orbiting laboratory. Dragon continuing to get bigger and bigger from the viewpoint of the International Space Station as waypoint 2 about 90 seconds away, and there it'll be just a mere 20 meters away. And there the spacecraft will focus on aligning its docking system with the docking adapter and then fly in to make the initial contact and give us what we will call that soft capture, or the soft capture ring will retract. And then the hooks will drive to form the hard mate. And that capture, or that initial contact, coming in about 6 minutes from now.